My name is Scarlett Morrison, and I'm 28 years old. 3 months ago, I inherited $18 million from my grandmother Beatrice, along with her real estate portfolio and business shares. Today, I'm standing in the marble foyer of my Beverly Hills mansion, staring at my sister Madison's tear-streaked face as she delivers what my family believes is their final ultimatum. "You have to give me the money, Scarlett," she sobs, her voice breaking with practiced desperation. "I need it more than you do. I have 3 children, medical bills, a mortgage." Behind her, my parents Harold and Judith nod solemnly, while my brother Trevor crosses his arms with barely concealed aggression. They want me to hand over everything because Madison supposedly deserves it more. Instead, I'm about to close the door on all of them forever. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and while you're there, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible family drama stories. You won't believe how far my family was willing to go to get their hands on my inheritance, and trust me, this is just the beginning of their shocking behavior. 3 months earlier, we stood in the rain outside St. Mary's Cathedral, mourning my grandmother Beatrice Morrison. She had been the matriarch of our family, the woman who built our fortune from nothing through decades of smart investments and business acumen. While my parents and siblings had always maintained a polite but distant relationship with her, I had spent countless weekends at her estate, learning about finance, business, and most importantly, integrity. Beatrice taught me that money was a tool, not a goal, and that family loyalty meant supporting each other through genuine love, not financial obligation. The reading of the will took place the following Tuesday in the mahogany-paneled office of Harrison, Wells, and Associates. Attorney Jonathan Harrison cleared his throat as our family gathered around the massive oak table. My parents sat rigid in their chairs. Madison clutched her husband Rick's hand nervously, and Trevor drummed his fingers impatiently on the leather armrest. I remember feeling genuinely sad about losing Beatrice, while everyone else seemed focused on what they might gain. "To my beloved granddaughter Scarlett Morrison," Mr. Harrison began, adjusting his glasses, "who showed me true companionship and genuine care in my final years, I leave the entirety of my estate." The silence that followed was deafening. He continued reading the specifics. $18 million in liquid assets, the Beverly Hills mansion worth $12 million, the Malibu beach house valued at $8 million, a portfolio of commercial properties generating $2 million annually, and 49% of Morrison Industries, the family business Beatrice had built from scratch. My mother Judith's face went completely pale, while my father Harold's jaw tightened visibly. Madison began crying immediately, not from grief, but from obvious disappointment. Trevor leaned forward aggressively, his voice sharp with disbelief. "There has to be some mistake. Grandmother always said the inheritance would be divided equally among all her grandchildren." Mr. Harrison shook his head firmly, explaining that Beatrice had updated her will just 6 months before her death, and she had been of completely sound mind. The drive home was excruciating. Madison sobbed loudly in the back seat while Rick muttered about unfairness and family obligations. My parents maintained stony silence, but I could feel their resentment radiating through the car. Trevor made several phone calls, already strategizing about potential legal challenges. Nobody congratulated me or acknowledged that perhaps Beatrice had reasons for her decision. Instead, they immediately began treating me like I had stolen something that rightfully belonged to them. That evening, my family held an impromptu meeting in my parents' living room without inviting me. I only learned about it when Trevor called me at midnight, his voice slurred with alcohol and thick with entitlement. "You know this isn't right, Scarlett," he said. "Beatrice was old and confused. Madison has real needs, real responsibilities. You're single, you don't have children, you don't need all that money." When I tried to explain that Beatrice had been mentally sharp until the day she died, Trevor cut me off. "We're family," he said coldly. "Family takes care of family. Don't forget that." Within a week of the will reading, my phone began ringing constantly. Every conversation started the same way. Expressions of love and family unity, followed immediately by suggestions that I should do the right thing, and share the inheritance. My mother, Judith, perfected a particularly effective guilt trip, calling me every morning with updates about Madison's supposed financial struggles. "She can barely afford groceries, Scarlett," Judith would say, her voice heavy with disapproval. "Meanwhile, you're sitting on millions you'll never need." Is this what Beatrice would have wanted? A divided family? Madison herself orchestrated elaborate scenes designed to showcase her desperation. She would arrive at my temporary apartment unannounced, her 3 children in tow, explaining how they were about to lose their house or how little Emma needed expensive medical treatment. Her 7-year-old daughter would look at me with practiced sadness, while Madison described their financial hardships in excruciating detail. "Mommy says we might have to move to a tiny apartment," Emma would whisper, having clearly been coached to deliver maximum emotional impact. My father, Harold, took a different approach, appealing to what he called my business sense. He would corner me with spreadsheets and projections, explaining how the family could pool resources and multiply the inheritance through strategic investments. "I've been managing family finances for 30 years, Scarlett," he would say, spreading documents across my kitchen table. "With my experience and this capital, we could turn 18 million into 50 million within 5 years. But only if we work together as a family unit." When I suggested that Beatrice had specifically chosen me to manage her legacy, Harold's face would darken with barely controlled anger. Trevor's tactics were far more aggressive. He would show up at my workplace, corner me at the grocery store, and even follow me to the gym. His arguments always centered on what he called family loyalty and blood obligations. During one particularly uncomfortable encounter in a restaurant parking lot, he grabbed my arm and hissed, "You're being selfish and greedy, Scarlett. Madison sacrificed her career to raise children while you focused on making money. She deserves this inheritance more than you do." When I pulled away, he accused me of turning my back on family values. The most insidious part of their campaign was how they began isolating me from my support system. They contacted my boyfriend James repeatedly, filling his ears with stories about my supposed greed and heartlessness. They reached out to my friends, colleagues, and even casual acquaintances, painting themselves as the victims of my sudden wealth and selfishness. My mother would call my best friend Rachel, crying about how money had changed me and turned me against my own family. "She won't even help her sister keep a roof over her children's heads," Judith would sob dramatically. Madison's husband Rick proved to be particularly manipulative. He would send me detailed financial breakdowns of their monthly expenses, highlighting every medical bill, school fee, and household cost. His emails always ended with passive-aggressive statements like, "We're not asking for charity, just family support in our time of need," or "Madison lies awake at night wondering how she failed as a sister." Rick also began making veiled threats about legal action, suggesting that families had successfully challenged wills before and that Beatrice might not have been as mentally competent as everyone believed. The constant pressure was exhausting. Every family gathering became an intervention. Every phone call became a negotiation session, and every interaction was loaded with guilt and manipulation. They made it clear that my acceptance into the family was now conditional on my willingness to share the inheritance. When I tried to explain that Beatrice had specific reasons for her decision and that I intended to honor her wishes, they dismissed my concerns as selfishness disguised as principle. As my family realized that guilt and pressure weren't working, their tactics became increasingly destructive. The first major escalation came when they began actively sabotaging my personal relationships. I discovered this when my boyfriend James confronted me after a particularly romantic dinner, his face serious and troubled. "Your family is really worried about you, Scarlett," he said, setting down his wine glass. "They think the inheritance has changed you, made you cold and greedy. Madison called me crying yesterday, saying you won't even help with her daughter's medical bills." When I tried to explain the real situation, James looked skeptical. "Your mom showed me the medical bills, Scarlett. We're talking about a sick child here. How can you justify hoarding millions while your niece suffers?" The conversation revealed that my family had been contacting James regularly, feeding him carefully crafted stories designed to make me look heartless. They had shown him fabricated medical documents, exaggerated financial statements, and even coached Madison's children to call James directly, begging him to convince their mean Aunt Scarlett to help them. Meanwhile, my father Harold manufactured a business emergency that conveniently required exactly the amount of money I had inherited. He called me in a panic one Tuesday morning, explaining that Morrison Industries was facing a hostile takeover attempt and needed immediate capital injection to survive. "This company is your grandmother's legacy, Scarlett," he said urgently. "If we lose it, everything Beatrice worked for disappears forever. I need $18 million within the week, or we're all ruined." When I suggested involving business lawyers and financial advisors to explore other options, Harold became furious. "There's no time for that bureaucratic nonsense," he snapped. "Family businesses require family solutions." My mother Judith's contribution to the sabotage campaign involved a mysterious health crisis that developed suddenly and required expensive treatment not covered by insurance. She began experiencing heart palpitations and chest pains that sent her to the emergency room multiple times per week. Each visit resulted in vague diagnoses and recommendations for costly specialized treatments. "The doctors say it could be serious," she would tell me weekly over the phone. "But the cardiology specialist wants $50,000 up front, and our insurance won't cover experimental procedures." When I offered to accompany her to medical appointments to better understand her condition, Judith always had excuses about scheduling conflicts or doctor preferences. Trevor's approach involved hiring lawyers to challenge the will's validity. He found a firm specializing in elder law and estate disputes, paying them with money he borrowed against his own house. The legal team began digging into Beatrice's mental state during her final months, interviewing her doctors, neighbors, and caregivers. Trevor would call me with updates about their progress, describing how they were building a case that Beatrice had been suffering from early-stage dementia and that I had manipulated her into changing the will. "We have witnesses who saw you visiting her constantly in those final months," he said threateningly. "It won't be hard to prove undue influence." Madison took the most emotionally devastating approach by weaponizing her children. She coached them to call me directly, their small voices quivering with rehearsed desperation. "Aunt Scarlett, why don't you love us anymore?" 6-year-old Tommy would ask. "Mommy says you have lots of money, but you won't help us keep our house." 8-year-old Emma was even more direct. "Daddy says we might have to live in our car because you won't share Grandma Beatrice's money with us." These calls always came at strategic times when I was at work or in public, maximizing the emotional impact and my inability to have lengthy explanations with children who clearly didn't understand the adult complexities involved. The family also launched a sophisticated public relations campaign designed to destroy my reputation in our community. They contacted members of our church, telling them that I had become consumed with greed and abandoned Christian values of charity and family support. They reached out to my professional colleagues, suggesting that my sudden wealth had made me arrogant and unreliable. Harold even contacted my boss, expressing concerns about my emotional stability and suggesting that handling such a large inheritance might be affecting my work performance. Social media became another battlefield. Madison created posts about struggling single mothers and the importance of family support, always including subtle references to wealthy relatives who refused to help their own blood. Rick shared articles about inheritance disputes and family greed, making sure to tag me in posts that would appear on all our mutual friends' feeds. My mother posted constant updates about her health struggles and financial stress, accompanied by cryptic comments about children who abandon their parents in times of need. The most devastating blow came when James finally broke up with me. The constant pressure from my family, combined with their carefully orchestrated evidence of my supposed selfishness, had convinced him that I was not the person he thought he knew. "I can't be with someone who would let her own niece go without medical treatment," he said during our final conversation. "Your family is falling apart, and instead of helping, you're counting your money. That's not the kind of person I want to build a future with." When I tried to explain that everything my family had told him was fabricated, he accused me of being delusional and unwilling to accept responsibility for my actions. Just when I thought my family's manipulation couldn't get more severe, Madison orchestrated the most elaborate and cruel deception yet. It started with a phone call from my mother at 3 in the morning, her voice breaking with what sounded like genuine terror. "Scarlett, you need to get to Cedars-Sinai Hospital immediately," Judith sobbed. Madison collapsed at home. "The doctors think it might be cancer. She's been hiding symptoms for months because she couldn't afford proper medical care." I rushed to the hospital, my heart pounding with guilt and fear. In the stark fluorescent lighting of the oncology ward, my family had assembled like a grief-stricken tableau. Harold sat with his head in his hands, Trevor paced frantically near the windows, and Rick held Madison's children while they cried quietly. When I approached Madison's hospital bed, she looked genuinely ill, her face pale and drawn, her hair disheveled. "I didn't want to worry anyone," she whispered weakly. "But the pain has been getting worse for months. I kept putting off seeing doctors because we couldn't afford the bills." The attending physician, Dr. Samuel Rodriguez, delivered what seemed like devastating news. Madison had aggressive ovarian cancer that had already spread to her lymph nodes. The prognosis was serious, but not hopeless if they could begin immediate treatment. However, the experimental chemotherapy protocol he recommended would cost nearly $200,000, and their insurance would only cover a fraction of the expenses. "Time is critical," Dr. Rodriguez explained solemnly. "Every week we delay treatment reduces her chances of survival significantly." My family's response was immediate and coordinated. Harold announced that he was taking a second mortgage on the family home to cover Madison's treatment costs, even though it would likely result in bankruptcy. Judith began researching charity organizations and fundraising options, her voice thick with desperation. Trevor offered to sell his own house and move his family into a small apartment. Rick quit his job to become Madison's full-time caregiver, even though it meant losing their primary source of income. The emotional pressure was overwhelming. Madison's children would visit her hospital bedside daily, their small faces filled with confusion and terror. "Is Mommy going to die like great-grandma Beatrice?" little Emma would ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Tommy drew pictures of their family with Madison conspicuously missing, telling anyone who would listen that his mother was very sick and needed expensive medicine to get better. The nurses commented constantly about what a strong, loving family Madison had, and how tragic it was that financial concerns were complicating her treatment options. Madison herself delivered Oscar-worthy performances during my visits. She would talk about her regrets and fears, expressing concern about her children's futures if she didn't survive. "I know you're angry with us about the inheritance situation," she would say weakly, "but I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us after I'm gone. I just wanted to secure my children's futures before it was too late." She would show me her medical charts, pointing to incomprehensible test results and explaining how the cancer markers were increasing dangerously.
Dr.
Rodriguez seemed completely legitimate, with proper credentials displayed in his office and a professional manner that inspired confidence. He would pull me aside during visits to explain Madison's condition in medical terms that sounded authoritative and urgent. "Your sister is lucky to have such a supportive family," he would say. "But I have to be honest with you about the financial reality. Without immediate treatment, we're looking at 6 months maximum survival time. With treatment, she has a 75% chance of complete remission." The family's sacrifice narrative became increasingly elaborate. Harold showed me mortgage documents and bank statements proving that he was liquidating his retirement savings for Madison's care. Judith began selling her jewelry and family heirlooms, creating a paper trail of desperate fundraising efforts. Trevor organized a community fundraiser, complete with flyers featuring Madison's photo and heartbreaking descriptions of her battle against cancer. Rick documented every medical appointment and treatment session, creating a comprehensive record of Madison's supposed fight for survival. Church members began approaching me with gentle suggestions about family responsibility and Christian charity. "Your sister is such a sweet woman," they would say. "It must be comforting to know that you have the resources to help her through this difficult time." Community members who knew about my inheritance would make pointed comments about how blessed I was to be in a position to save a family member's life. The social pressure was suffocating, with everyone expecting me to step forward as Madison's financial savior. However, something about the situation felt wrong. Madison's symptoms seemed inconsistent. Her energy levels varied dramatically between visits, and her medical schedule appeared surprisingly flexible for someone undergoing intensive cancer treatment. During one visit, I noticed that her hospital bracelet showed a different patient identification number than it had the week before. When I asked about it, Madison claimed there had been an administrative error, but her explanation felt rehearsed. My suspicions deepened when I decided to hire a private investigator to verify Madison's medical situation. Within a week, Detective Patricia Wells presented me with photographic evidence that shattered the entire deception. Madison had been spotted shopping at luxury boutiques, dining at expensive restaurants, and getting her hair professionally styled at an upscale salon. The medical appointments she claimed to be attending were completely fabricated, and her supposed chemotherapy sessions were actually spa visits and social lunches with friends. The most damning evidence came when Patricia confronted Dr. Rodriguez directly. Under pressure, he admitted that Madison had paid him $5,000 to participate in a fake diagnosis scheme. He provided her with legitimate-looking medical documents, coached her on cancer symptoms, and agreed to confirm her condition to family members. The entire medical emergency was an elaborate performance designed to guilt me into giving Madison access to the inheritance money. Armed with the knowledge of Madison's fake cancer diagnosis, I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak that my family could orchestrate such a cruel deception. But before I could confront them about the medical fraud, my father Harold launched what he clearly believed would be his masterstroke, demanding control of my grandmother's business shares through emotional manipulation and manufactured urgency. He called an emergency family meeting at Morrison Industries headquarters, the imposing glass building that Beatrice had built from nothing over 4 decades. Harold had prepared the conference room like a war room, with financial documents covering every surface and multiple lawyers flanking his position at the head of the mahogany table. "We're facing a hostile takeover attempt from Meridian Corporation," he announced grimly, his voice heavy with manufactured desperation. "They've been buying up shares secretly for months, and they're now positioned to seize control of everything Beatrice worked to build. The only way to stop them is to consolidate family ownership, which means I need your 49% immediately." Trevor had clearly been briefed extensively on this new strategy. He presented detailed financial projections showing how Meridian's takeover would destroy the company's legacy and eliminate hundreds of jobs. "This isn't about money anymore, Scarlett," he said, his voice earnest and urgent. "This is about preserving our grandmother's life work. She trusted you with those shares because she believed you would protect the family business, not watch it get destroyed by corporate raiders." My mother Judith's contribution involved weeping dramatically about Beatrice's memory being tarnished by business failure. "Your grandmother built this company to provide for her family for generations," she sobbed, dabbing her eyes with expensive tissues. "If we lose it to strangers, everything she's sacrificed for becomes meaningless. She's probably turning over in her grave, knowing that the granddaughter she trusted most is letting her legacy crumble." Madison, still supposedly recovering from her fake cancer diagnosis, arrived looking appropriately frail and determined. "Even facing my own mortality," she said weakly, "I can't bear the thought of losing Grandma Beatrice's company. Those shares represent more than money to our family. They represent everything our grandmother stood for. Hard work, family loyalty, and building something lasting for future generations." Rick nodded solemnly beside her, having coached her on this particular performance. The lawyers Harold had hired presented official-looking documents requiring immediate signatures to transfer my shares into a family trust controlled by Harold as senior patriarch. They explained complex legal structures and corporate governance issues in intimidating language clearly designed to make me feel overwhelmed and dependent on Harold's expertise. "Time is absolutely critical," the lead attorney emphasized. "Meridian is moving quickly, and if we don't consolidate control within 48 hours, the opportunity to save the company will be lost forever." Harold's emotional manipulation reached new heights as he described his personal relationship with the business. I've spent 35 years of my life building on your grandmother's foundation, he said, his voice breaking with apparent emotion. Morrison Industries isn't just a company to me. It's my life's work, my legacy to my children and grandchildren. If we lose it because you won't trust your own father with temporary control, I'll never recover from that betrayal. The family's coordinated pressure campaign intensified dramatically over the following days. They organized shifts to ensure someone was always at my apartment, my office, or wherever I might be, delivering urgent updates about the supposed takeover threat. Harold would call every few hours with breathless reports about Meridian's latest moves and how much time we had left to respond. Trevor compiled newspaper clippings about other family businesses destroyed by hostile takeovers, leaving them strategically placed where I would find them. Madison's children were once again weaponized as emotional leverage, but this time their scripted pleas focused on the family business rather than medical bills. "Aunt Scarlett, are you going to let the bad men take Grandpa's company away?" little Emma would ask during staged phone calls. "Daddy says the company has been in our family forever, and if you don't help, we'll lose everything Grandma Beatrice worked for." Rick escalated his intimidation tactics significantly, showing up at my workplace and confronting me in the parking garage. "You're destroying this family, Scarlett," he hissed, standing uncomfortably close. "First you let Madison suffer through cancer without helping, and now you're going to let corporate vultures steal our grandmother's life work. What kind of person are you?" When I tried to walk away, he grabbed my arm and continued his verbal assault. "Madison is fighting for her life, and instead of supporting your family, you're obsessing over paperwork and legal technicalities." The supposed urgency reached fever pitch when Harold claimed that Meridian had accelerated their timeline and was planning to announce the takeover publicly within 24 hours. "This is it, Scarlett," he called me at midnight, his voice desperate and exhausted. "After tomorrow, it's all over. Beatrice's entire legacy disappears forever, and it's all because her own granddaughter refused to trust her family when we needed her most." However, my recent experience with Madison's fake medical crisis had made me deeply suspicious of any family emergency requiring immediate financial decisions. I contacted my own business attorneys and financial advisors, instructing them to investigate Meridian Corporation and the alleged takeover threat independently. Their research revealed that no such threat existed. Meridian Corporation was a small regional firm with no interest in acquiring Morrison Industries, and there had been no unusual stock activity or corporate maneuvering. Furthermore, my investigation revealed that Harold had been systematically embezzling from Morrison Industries for over a decade. He had been using his position as interim CEO to funnel company funds into personal investments, luxury purchases, and gambling debts. The supposed financial crisis at the company was actually the result of Harold's mismanagement and theft, not external corporate pressure. He needed my shares to gain full control of the company and cover up his crimes before the board of directors discovered his financial misconduct. Trevor's role in the scheme was equally disturbing. He had been helping Harold hide the embezzlement by falsifying financial reports and bribing company accountants to overlook discrepancies. His aggressive push for me to sign over my shares was motivated by desperation to avoid prison time for his participation in the fraud. The lawyers Harold had hired were not corporate specialists but criminal defense attorneys preparing for the legal consequences of their financial crimes. Having failed to secure my inheritance through fake medical emergencies and fraudulent business crises, my family escalated to their most vicious and destructive tactic yet: false accusations of child abuse designed to destroy my reputation and potentially result in criminal charges. Madison orchestrated this final assault with chilling calculation, knowing that allegations involving children's safety would be taken seriously by authorities and create maximum damage to my personal and professional life. The attack began on a Tuesday morning when 2 police officers appeared at my office, their expressions serious and professional. "Ms. Morrison, we need to speak with you about some allegations that have been made against you," Detective Laura Chen explained. "Your sister Madison claims that you threatened to harm her children during a family dispute about inheritance money. She's provided evidence of these threats, and we're required to investigate all reports involving potential child endangerment." Madison's fabricated story was elaborate and convincing. She claimed that I had visited her house the previous weekend, demanded that she support my decision to keep the inheritance, and when she refused, I had become violently angry and threatening. According to her false testimony, I had grabbed 7-year-old Emma by the shoulders, shaken her roughly, and told her that bad things happen to children whose mothers don't cooperate with their aunts. She alleged that I had also threatened to make sure their family lost everything if Madison continued trying to claim her rightful share of Beatrice's estate. Rick provided supporting testimony that was equally fabricated, but disturbingly detailed. He claimed that he had witnessed my supposed threats and that the children had been traumatized by my aggressive behavior. She was like a completely different person, he told police, his voice heavy with manufactured concern. The money has changed her into someone we don't recognize. She was screaming at Madison, scaring the kids, and making threats about what would happen if we didn't back down from our inheritance claims. My mother Judith delivered what was perhaps the most devastating betrayal of all. During her police interview, she provided a detailed character assassination disguised as reluctant family testimony. "I hate to say this about my own daughter," she told investigators, dabbing her eyes with tissues, "but Scarlett has become increasingly unstable since receiving that inheritance. She's always been jealous of Madison's children and resentful of the attention they receive. I've been worried about her mental state for months, especially after she refused to help with Madison's cancer treatment." Trevor's contribution to the false allegations was particularly calculated. He had secretly recorded portions of several family conversations, then edited them to remove context and create the impression that I had made threatening statements. The recordings were sophisticated enough to fool casual listeners, with my voice clearly audible making statements like, "Madison needs to learn, and those children should understand consequences." But Trevor had edited out the full conversations where I was actually discussing Madison's manipulation tactics and the need for her children to understand that adults sometimes disagree about money. Harold's role involved providing what appeared to be documented evidence of my supposed instability. He had kept detailed records of every family interaction since the will reading, carefully noting any moments when I had expressed frustration or anger about their pressure campaigns. His testimony painted a picture of escalating hostility and concerning behavior patterns that culminated in the alleged threats against Madison's children. The fabricated evidence was disturbingly comprehensive. Madison had coached her children to provide consistent testimony about my supposed threats, teaching them specific phrases and details that would corroborate her story. 8-year-old Emma could recite exactly what I had allegedly said and done, her small voice quivering with rehearsed fear, as she described how Aunt Scarlett grabbed me and scared me. 6-year-old Tommy provided supporting details about my supposed angry facial expressions and raised voice during the alleged incident. The family had even manufactured physical evidence to support their claims. Madison photographed bruises on Emma's arms that were actually from normal childhood activities, presenting them as evidence of my supposed rough handling. She documented the children's behavioral changes following my alleged threats, creating a timeline of crying episodes, nightmares, and anxiety symptoms that she claimed were direct results of my intimidation. Social services became involved immediately, launching their own investigation into my fitness to be around children. The caseworker assigned to our situation was thorough and professional, but she was working with deliberately misleading information provided by my family. Madison's performance as a concerned mother protecting her children from an unstable relative was convincing enough to raise serious red flags about my mental state and potential danger to minors. The community response was swift and devastating. Word of the child abuse allegations spread quickly through our social circles, church community, and professional networks. Parents who had previously included me in social gatherings suddenly found reasons to exclude me from events involving children. My reputation in the business community suffered as colleagues began questioning my judgment and emotional stability. James, my ex-boyfriend, called to express his disgust and vindication. "I knew something was wrong with you," he said coldly. "Thank God I got out of that relationship before you showed your true colors." Threatening children over money is beyond despicable. When I tried to explain that the allegations were completely false, he accused me of being delusional and advised me to seek professional help for my obvious mental health problems. The legal implications were terrifying. If the false allegations were substantiated, I could face criminal charges for child endangerment, lose my professional licenses, and potentially spend years rebuilding my reputation, even if eventually cleared. My family had calculated that even if their lies were eventually exposed, the damage to my life would be so severe that I would be willing to give them anything to make the investigation disappear. However, their elaborate deception contained several fatal flaws that my legal team was able to identify and exploit. The timeline Madison provided for my alleged visit didn't match my actual whereabouts, which could be verified through credit card records, security footage, and witness testimony. The recordings Trevor had edited were examined by audio forensics experts who could prove they had been manipulated. Most importantly, the coaching of Madison's children was so extensive that their testimony contained details that no child would naturally remember or describe in such adult language. The false child abuse allegations were so serious and potentially devastating that I knew I needed to move beyond defensive strategies and begin gathering comprehensive evidence of my family's systematic fraud and manipulation. I hired Rebecca Martinez, one of the most respected private investigators in Los Angeles, along with a team of forensic accountants, digital evidence specialists, and legal experts who specialized in family fraud cases. Their investigation would ultimately expose the shocking scope of my family's coordinated deception. Rebecca's team began by conducting comprehensive surveillance of my family members, documenting their actual activities and financial situations versus the stories they had been telling authorities and the community. Within a week, they had photographic evidence of Madison engaging in activities that completely contradicted her claims of poverty and medical crisis. The surveillance photos showed her shopping at Nordstrom, dining at expensive restaurants, and getting professional beauty treatments at an upscale spa. Her supposed cancer treatment appointments were actually social lunches with friends and personal shopping excursions. The financial forensics investigation revealed the true scope of my family's deception about their economic circumstances. Harold and Judith weren't facing financial ruin from Madison's medical bills, as they had claimed. Instead, Harold had been living far beyond his means for years, using his position at Morrison Industries to embezzle company funds for luxury vacations, gambling debts, and expensive purchases. Judith had been spending money on jewelry, designer clothing, and cosmetic procedures while claiming to sacrifice everything for Madison's fake cancer treatment. Trevor's financial situation was equally fraudulent. He had presented himself as a struggling family man willing to sell his house to help his sister, but the investigation revealed that his house was already in foreclosure due to his gambling addiction and poor investment decisions. His aggressive pursuit of my inheritance wasn't motivated by family loyalty, but by desperate need to cover his debts and avoid bankruptcy. The lawyers he had hired to challenge Beatrice's will were actually being paid with money he had borrowed from loan sharks. Madison and Rick's supposed poverty was perhaps the most elaborate fabrication of all. They had been living in a rental property while claiming to face foreclosure on a home they had never actually owned. Rick's sacrifice of quitting his job to care for Madison was actually the result of being fired for embezzling from his employer. The medical bills they had shown me were completely fabricated, created using sophisticated document editing software and fake letterhead from legitimate medical facilities. The digital evidence team made several breakthrough discoveries that exposed the coordination behind my family's deception campaign. They recovered deleted text messages between family members that revealed detailed planning sessions for their various schemes. Harold had sent Trevor explicit instructions about which lies to tell and when, while Judith had coordinated Madison's fake medical appointments and coached her on symptoms to display. Rick had been responsible for creating fraudulent documents and managing the technical aspects of their deception. Perhaps most damaging to their credibility, the investigation uncovered evidence that Madison had researched online how to fake cancer symptoms and had purchased theater makeup to simulate the pallor and fatigue associated with chemotherapy treatments. She had spent hours watching videos of actual cancer patients to perfect her performance, studying their mannerisms, speech patterns, and physical presentations. Her deception was so calculated and premeditated that it demonstrated clear intent to defraud rather than desperate circumstances driving poor judgment. The The audio forensics analysis of Trevor's edited recordings provided irrefutable proof of evidence tampering. Experts could identify exact points where conversations had been cut and spliced, removing crucial context that would have exonerated me completely. The original recordings, recovered from Trevor's digital devices, showed me actually defending Madison's children and expressing concern about how the family conflict might affect them emotionally. Trevor had deliberately reversed the meaning of my statements to create false evidence of threats and hostility. Medical records investigations exposed the fake cancer diagnosis as a sophisticated fraud involving Dr. Samuel Rodriguez, who had previous disciplinary actions for participating in insurance fraud schemes. Rebecca's team discovered that Rodriguez had been paid not just $5,000 as originally believed, but actually $25,000 over several months to maintain the elaborate medical deception. He had provided Madison with genuine medical equipment to use as props, coached her on medical terminology, and even created fake test results using hospital computer systems. The investigation into my family's coaching of Madison's children was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of their deception. Child psychology experts who reviewed recorded interviews with Emma and Tommy identified clear signs of adult coaching and rehearsed responses. The children had been systematically taught to lie about events that never occurred, with their testimony containing adult vocabulary and sophisticated concepts that children their ages wouldn't naturally understand or describe. The psychological damage of forcing young children to participate in elaborate deceptions was something the experts characterized as a form of emotional abuse. Background checks on Rick revealed his extensive history of financial fraud and family manipulation. He had previously been involved in inheritance disputes with his own family, using similar tactics of manufactured medical crises and false accusations to gain access to estate funds. His marriage to Madison appeared to be specifically motivated by knowledge of her potential inheritance from Beatrice, with evidence suggesting he had researched our family's wealth before beginning their relationship. The most shocking discovery was a detailed written plan found on Harold's computer that outlined their entire strategy for obtaining my inheritance. The document contained specific timelines, assigned roles for each family member, backup plans for different scenarios, and even calculations about how much money they would need to sustain their lifestyle until they gained access to Beatrice's estate. The plan demonstrated that their manipulation campaign had been premeditated for months, beginning even before Beatrice's death. Security footage from various locations provided additional evidence contradicting my family's claims. Hospital cameras showed Madison entering and leaving medical facilities during times when she was supposed to be receiving chemotherapy treatments, but the footage revealed she was actually visiting the hospital gift shop and cafeteria as part of her deception. Bank security cameras captured Harold making large cash withdrawals that contradicted his claims about mortgage payments and medical expenses. Armed with comprehensive evidence of my family's elaborate fraud, I faced a critical decision about how to proceed. My legal team advised that we had enough evidence to pursue criminal charges against every family member involved in the deception, but they also warned that a public legal battle would be emotionally devastating and potentially damaging to my own reputation. However, my family's decision to escalate their campaign with one final, desperate attempt made the choice for me. The last assault came when Madison staged what appeared to be a suicide attempt, complete with ambulance sirens, emergency room drama, and intensive care monitoring. I received the call from my mother at 4 a.m, her voice breaking with what sounded like genuine hysteria. "Scarlett, Madison tried to kill herself." Judith sobbed into the phone. "She couldn't handle the stress of fighting cancer while you refused to help the family. She took a bottle of pills and left a note saying she couldn't burden us anymore." I rushed to the hospital once again, my heart pounding with guilt and terror despite everything I had learned about my family's deceptions. In the intensive care unit, Madison lay unconscious and connected to various monitoring devices, looking genuinely close to death. Rick sat beside her bed, his face haggard with apparent grief and exhaustion. "The doctors don't know if she'll make it," he whispered, his voice breaking. "She left a note saying the inheritance dispute had destroyed her will to live." Harold and Trevor flanked me as we stood outside Madison's room, their voices heavy with accusation and blame. "This is what your greed has accomplished," Harold said coldly. "Your own sister would rather die than continue fighting you for what's rightfully hers. If she doesn't survive this, her blood is on your hands." Trevor nodded grimly, adding that Madison's suicide attempt was a direct result of my selfishness and refusal to honor family obligations. The supposed suicide note was heart-wrenching in its apparent authenticity and emotional manipulation. Madison had written about feeling like a burden to her family, expressing guilt about the cancer diagnosis she couldn't afford to treat, and describing her despair about losing her children's inheritance to her greedy sister. The note specifically mentioned how my threats against her children had pushed her over the edge, providing what appeared to be a dying woman's final testimony about my abusive behavior. My family's coordinated response to Madison's suicide attempt was immediate and comprehensive. They contacted local news stations, portraying the situation as a tragic consequence of inheritance greed destroying family bonds. Judith gave tearful interviews about losing one daughter to wealth-induced selfishness and potentially losing another daughter to despair. Harold spoke gravely about family businesses being destroyed by individual greed, while Trevor positioned himself as the only remaining family member trying to hold everyone together. The community response was overwhelming and completely supportive of my family's narrative. Church members organized prayer vigils for Madison's recovery and expressed shock about my supposed role in driving her to suicide. Former friends called to express their disgust about my behavior, and several professional colleagues suggested that my emotional instability made me unfit for positions requiring sound judgment. The social pressure was more intense than anything I had experienced during the entire inheritance dispute. However, Rebecca Martinez and her investigation team had been monitoring my family's communications and activities closely enough to expose this final deception immediately. Hospital security footage showed Madison entering the emergency room under her own power, fully conscious and coordinated, before supposedly taking the overdose of pills. Medical records revealed that she had actually taken a carefully calculated amount of over-the-counter medication that would cause dramatic symptoms without serious health risks. More damning evidence emerged when digital forensics experts analyzed the metadata of Madison's supposed suicide note. The document had been created several days before her supposed attempt, with multiple revision sessions that showed careful editing and refinement of the emotional content. The note contained phrases and terminology that matched previous documents created by Rick, suggesting that he had been the actual author of Madison's supposed final words. The confrontation happened in Madison's hospital room while she was still maintaining her unconscious charade. I arrived with Rebecca Martinez, my attorney Sarah Chin, and a team of medical experts who had reviewed her case independently. As hospital staff prepared to remove Madison's monitoring equipment based on our evidence, I spoke directly to her supposedly unconscious form. "Madison, I know you can hear me," I said firmly. "We have evidence that your suicide attempt was staged, just like your cancer diagnosis, just like Harold's business emergency, just like everything else you've done to try to steal my inheritance. The medical experts confirm that you took a calculated dose of medication designed to cause dramatic symptoms without real danger. Your suicide note was written days in advance and contains phrases that match Rick's previous documents." Madison's eyes snapped open immediately, her unconscious act abandoned in favor of desperate damage control. "You can't prove anything," she said quickly, then seemed to realize that her sudden consciousness contradicted hours of medical monitoring showing her in a comatose state. Rick began arguing loudly with the medical staff, trying to create chaos that would distract from Madison's obvious deception. Harold and Trevor's reactions revealed the coordination behind their entire campaign. Instead of expressing relief that Madison was conscious and apparently recovered, they immediately began discussing legal strategies and damage control measures. Trevor started making phone calls to lawyers, while Harold demanded to speak with hospital administrators about patient privacy rights and unauthorized investigations. The legal consequences unfolded rapidly once law enforcement became involved with our comprehensive evidence package. Detective Chin, who had initially investigated the false child abuse allegations, was particularly focused on the coaching of Madison's children and the fabrication of evidence involving minors. Social services opened their own investigation into emotional abuse of children through forced participation in adult deception schemes. Harold faced the most serious charges related to his embezzlement from Morrison Industries and his role as the orchestrator of the family's fraud campaign. Federal authorities became involved due to the interstate nature of some financial crimes and the involvement of fraudulent medical billing that crossed state lines. Trevor's charges included evidence tampering, perjury, and conspiracy to commit fraud, with potential penalties enhanced by his use of edited audio recordings to create false evidence. Madison and Rick faced charges related to insurance fraud, making false police reports, child endangerment through coaching minors to lie, and conspiracy to commit inheritance fraud. The fake suicide attempt was treated as a separate offense involving false emergency services reports and fraudulent medical claims. Judith's charges focused on her role in the conspiracy and her false testimony to police investigators. The community reaction shifted dramatically once evidence of the family's elaborate deception became public. Local news stations that had portrayed my family sympathetically were forced to issue corrections and retractions. Church members expressed shock and disappointment about being manipulated into supporting what they now understood to be criminal fraud. Professional colleagues who had questioned my judgment instead began praising my restraint in handling such an extreme family situation. The immediate aftermath of exposing my family's elaborate fraud was both liberating and devastating. While I felt vindicated by the evidence that proved their systematic deception, I also had to process the profound grief of losing my entire family to their greed and manipulation. The legal proceedings moved forward swiftly, with each family member facing serious criminal charges that would fundamentally change their lives forever. Harold's trial received the most media attention due to the complexity of his embezzlement scheme and his role as the orchestrator of the family's fraud campaign. Federal prosecutors presented evidence showing that he had stolen over $2 million from Morrison Industries over the past decade, using his position to fund gambling debts, luxury purchases, and the elaborate deception targeting my inheritance. His conviction resulted in a 12-year federal prison sentence and full restitution requirements that would consume any assets he had remaining. Trevor's conviction for evidence tampering and conspiracy carried a 6-year sentence, with additional civil penalties related to his participation in the business fraud. The edited audio recordings he had created were used as examples in law enforcement training programs about sophisticated evidence manipulation techniques. His gambling addiction and debt problems, exposed during the trial, led to the loss of his house and professional licenses. Madison and Rick's trials were particularly emotional due to the involvement of their children and the fake medical emergencies that had manipulated community sympathy. Madison received an 8-year sentence for her role in the conspiracy, with additional charges related to child endangerment for coaching her children to lie. Rick's extensive history of financial fraud resulted in a 10-year sentence, and their children were placed in temporary custody with Rick's sister while Madison served her time. Judith's conviction was perhaps the most heartbreaking for me personally, as she had been the family member I had hoped might eventually understand the situation and choose family relationships over financial gain. Her 4-year sentence and the revelation of her active participation in coaching Madison's deception marked the final end of any possibility for maternal reconciliation. The healing process began slowly and required professional guidance from trauma specialists who understood family betrayal and financial abuse dynamics. Dr. Angela Roberts, my therapist, helped me understand that my family's behavior represented a form of psychological and emotional abuse that was just as damaging as physical violence. Learning to process the grief of losing my entire family while simultaneously dealing with their criminal targeting required extensive therapeutic work. Reconnecting with my grandmother Beatrice's true friends provided unexpected comfort and insight during this difficult period. Her longtime friend Eleanor Walsh invited me to tea one afternoon and shared stories about Beatrice's own struggles with family members who had tried to manipulate her wealth over the years. "Your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she left everything to you," Eleanor said gently. "She had watched your parents and siblings for decades, and she understood their true motivations better than anyone realized." Establishing the Beatrice Morrison Foundation became my way of honoring my grandmother's memory while using the inheritance for purposes that would have made her proud. The foundation focuses on providing support for families dealing with elder abuse, inheritance disputes, and financial manipulation. We also fund legal assistance for individuals facing false accusations from family members seeking financial gain, having learned firsthand how devastating such attacks can be. Professional relationships gradually returned to normal as colleagues and business partners understood the full scope of what I had endured. My reputation in the business community was actually enhanced by my handling of such an extreme situation with integrity and legal precision. Several business opportunities emerged from people who respected how I had managed the crisis while maintaining ethical standards. James's attempt at reconciliation came about 6 months after the trials concluded, when he realized the extent of my family's manipulation and his own role in abandoning me during my most difficult period. His phone call was filled with apologies and requests for another chance, but the experience had taught me valuable lessons about recognizing genuine support versus fair-weather relationships. "I appreciate your apology," I told him honestly, "but someone who abandons me based on lies from people trying to destroy me isn't someone I can trust with my heart." New relationships developed naturally as I became involved with charity work and business ventures aligned with my values. I met David Richardson through the Foundation's work, where he volunteers as a legal advocate for elder abuse victims. Our relationship built slowly on shared values and mutual respect rather than financial considerations or family pressure. Having experienced the worst of human greed and manipulation, I was able to recognize and appreciate genuine kindness and integrity. Morrison Industries thrived under proper management once Harold's embezzlement was discovered and corrected. The company's legitimate success provided additional resources for the foundation and validated Beatrice's business instincts. Working with the business she had built gave me a deeper connection to her memory and a better understanding of why she had trusted me with her legacy. The impact on Madison's children remained a concern despite their parents' criminal behavior. I established anonymous college funds for all 3 children and ensured they had access to counseling to process their parents' deception and incarceration. While I couldn't have direct contact with them due to legal restrictions, I wanted to honor my genuine affection for them while protecting them from further manipulation. Community relationships evolved significantly as people understood how they had been manipulated by my family's elaborate deception campaign. Many neighbors and church members apologized for their initial judgments and expressed admiration for my restraint in handling such extreme circumstances. The experience taught our entire community valuable lessons about recognizing manipulation and the importance of seeking truth rather than accepting emotional appeals at face value. Legal reforms emerged from our case, with law enforcement agencies developing better protocols for investigating family financial disputes and recognizing sophisticated deception campaigns. The audio editing techniques Trevor had used were incorporated into training programs for detectives and forensics experts, helping future investigations identify similar evidence tampering. 3 years later, I can honestly say that losing my family was ultimately a liberation rather than a tragedy. The people who loved me conditionally based on my willingness to be manipulated and financially exploited were never truly family in any meaningful sense. Beatrice's decision to entrust me with her legacy was based on her accurate assessment of character rather than blood relationships or emotional manipulation. Today, as I sit in the garden behind Beatrice's mansion where I spent so many weekends learning about life and business, I feel her approval and presence in a way that my actual family never provided. The $18 million they fought so desperately to steal has become a tool for genuine family support, community assistance, and business success that honors her memory and values. The foundation has helped over 500 families dealing with similar inheritance disputes and elder abuse situations. Morrison Industries has doubled in value and provides good jobs for over 1,000 employees. My personal relationships are built on mutual respect and shared values rather than financial considerations or family obligations. The life I built after closing the door on my manipulative family is infinitely richer than anything I could have achieved by enabling their destructive behavior. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to participate in someone else's dysfunction, even when that someone shares your blood. Beatrice taught me that family is defined by loyalty, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being, not by willingness to be manipulated or exploited. The family I've built through choice rather than genetics provides the love and support that my biological family never could. What would you have done if you faced a similar situation with your own family? How do you think you would handle the pressure to give up everything you worked for just to keep peace with manipulative relatives? Let me know in the comments below, and please share your own experiences with family conflicts over money or inheritance. Don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life family drama stories, and share this with anyone who might be dealing with similar family manipulation. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to respect your boundaries, even when those people are family. I hope you find the courage to protect yourself and honor the people who truly deserve your loyalty and love.